Senator Durbin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Chairman Benham, for being with us today. I'm glad that we're having this hearing. I know that we thought about it a few weeks back. The world has changed pretty dramatically, and it really became more compelling for us to move forward on this, and I'm glad that you're here. I know a little bit more about your agency than some because the CFTC is a major regulatory agency when it comes to a massive investment industry in the city of Chicago. And so I've watched it through the years as a member of the House, a member of the Senate, and have a great deal of respect for it. I've always felt that you are a legitimate cop on the beat, and that's one of the reasons why the integrity of the process in Chicago is respected, not just statewide and nationwide, but worldwide. So I want you to be strong and appropriately funded to regulate an industry which is very important to the state that I represent. That's my intro. That's not bad, right?
Senator, I couldn't be more happy and thankful for that statement.
So let's talk about FTX for a minute. Less than 3 years old, supposedly worth $32 billion, 1 million users, and it collapsed overnight. I saw what Mr. Bankman-Fried was tweeting. I suppose that's where his users get their information. And he led them right up to the cliff, the edge of the cliff, and then they fell off and couldn't recover what they had invested in the process. I just might add, and I think it should be noted by all the members on this committee, there'll be a reporter waiting in the hall, I've already talked to her this morning, who will ask you, did he ever contribute to your campaign? I said, oh no, I never heard of the man. She said, you're wrong, Senator, he contributed to you. So the cryptocurrency people are active politically, and they are trying to achieve a political end here. It is their right as citizens of this country to do that, but it really calls on us to make sure that whatever we do is credible under those circumstances. How long will it take to unpack the FTX mess to be able to understand exactly what happened and where it stands today?
Senator, I think we have a cursory understanding of what happened. We mentioned this today: the commingling of funds, the conflicts of interest, the lack of a custodian to separate those funds, the lack of books and records. As John Reyes said, just a sort of complete disaster from risk controls. I think that's fine at a cursory level. I think it's going to take months probably before we truly understand the extent and scope of the failure.
And who's going to do that investigation?
Senator, as I mentioned to Senator Thune, we are a civil enforcement agency. We are using the full extent of our power under the law to police any infraction or violation of the law. I know our sister agencies across the U.S. and the globe are doing that as well. Enforcement cases take time, but we're moving expeditiously, and we understand the importance of this.
So this legislation, which is before the committee to consider, is to enhance or improve your authority in this area. Is that correct?
It's to fill a gap over commodity spot tokens, correct.
All right. So I find this interesting. I want to put it in this perspective. It seems to be there is a competition, at least at the Capitol Hill level, between those who believe there should be no regulation, that this is the new world order. You don't need the full faith and credit of any nation or known entity as long as your computer program is sophisticated enough. I'm skeptical of that personally, but that seems to be one point of view. The second point of view is CFTC is a nice agency, but it's a small agency, and this is a big, big problem and challenge. If it's going to take you months to figure out what happened to one of the larger players when they collapsed overnight, how are you going to maintain the daily regulation of this industry that is, at least until the recent collapse, was mushrooming in size? And there are some who say, you got a fundamental problem that you face here. When you want to fund the CFTC's activities, you come hat in hand to members of Congress because you need an appropriation. The SEC is largely funded by fees charged to those who are using the regulated entities. Now, I know that you asked for a user fee as part of this. And as I understand it, your general appropriation is in the $300 million range for CFTC. Is that correct?
$320 million.
And you believe that the user fees you're asking for from this digital industry will generate how much?
Well, Senator, it depends on how much appropriators set the level at. And that would obviously require collaboration with us, but what we would have to do if the DCCPA passed at the agency level is determine what funds we needed to implement the rules and to enforce and impose the rules, and then provide a request to you, and you would set the level, not unlike the SEC, and then we would collect those fees requisite with what you set the level at.
So ultimately, Congress has something to say about the user fees.
You have all to say.
So the reason I'm doing this is to put it in the context. Mr. Bankman-Fried, my contributor, and people just like him are going to be spending a lot of money to make sure there's as little regulation as possible. And unfortunately, you are a captive of a process that is driven by politicians like myself. So what assurance do we have that you're going to have adequate resources, the staff, the technology, the people, over and above the authority to execute any kind of meaningful regulation of an industry which is almost impossible to describe, let alone regulate?
Senator, a couple of things. I want to agree with you on your point about regulation versus non-regulation. This area needs to be regulated. All components of it need to be regulated, without a question. Second, in terms of responsibilities and the, this narrative of small or weak agency couldn't be farther from the truth. I shared that with Senator Bozeman, and I could give you reasons why. We have a separation of duty and a separation of responsibilities at the agency in terms of months-long enforcement action. That is done by the enforcement team. They are best in class in the world, and they are laser-focused on this right now, and they will get the job done. That is completely separate than our policy divisions and those that regulate entities and do the day-to-day work of examinations and regulations of our institutions, including the institutions in your state. In terms of why I'm going to be honest and be very forthright about what I need to do, what I need to do, I'm always happy to come before this committee and tell you what I think and tell you what I need, but I'd much rather be at the CFTC doing my job right now. So I'm going to tell you what I need because I need to do my job and I need to fulfill the mandate that you provide to me. So if you provide me authority to oversee cash market, commodity, digital tokens, I will be very transparent with you about what I need to fulfill that responsibility 110% without.
I don't question your commitment to this, your honesty, or your experience, but you are going to go through a political process to determine whether you have $1 to deal with this. The last thing I'll say is I've heard some of my colleagues say, we got to move on this fast. We've got to be the leader in the world when it comes to cryptocurrency. I don't know if they're saying that now as they did a month ago. The notion, and some people have actually articulated to me, do you realize Malta's on the march in terms of becoming a major factor in cryptocurrency? How about Portugal? How about El Salvador? Well, I'm just telling you, I happen to believe, reflecting on Chicago, your agency, and the SEC for a moment, there's a hell of a lot more credibility when the United States says this is properly regulated and the world can respect it. And we ought to take the time to make sure we not only salve our consciences, but make sure that we provide the resources to get that kind of regulation. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you very much.